Today we're going to talk about my staging yard, which I consider to be one of the most important features on my layout. Stick around, that's coming right up. Hi, I'm Roy Smith. In this video, I want to tell you why I consider my staging yard to be so important. I also want to describe the benchwork that supports the staging yard and the track arrangement in it. And finally, I want to briefly cover wiring and operations in the staging yard. Of course, by staging, I'm referring to tracks where trains are held until they are ready to come onto the scenicked part of the layout. This red circle shows you the area I am modeling. As such, my layout is just part of a much larger transcontinental rail system. In fact, the area I'm modeling is a bridge route between the American Midwest and West Coast. My staging yard represents off-layout origins and destinations to the east and to the west of the Union Pacific Evanston subdivision, which I am modeling. Thanks to the staging yard, trains appear to come from someplace off-layout, cross the layout, and then go someplace off-layout. I discussed these origins and destinations in a video called Off-Layout Origins and Destinations back in August of this year. I will put a link to that video down below in the description to this video. As I mentioned in previous videos, I don't model a lot of industries on my layout. Partly this is because there aren't many small industries served by the railroad in the area I'm modeling. And partly it's because industrial switching isn't my primary interest. That's why on my layout, staging also represents the locations of off-layout industries. For example, coal mines and oil refineries to the east of the area I'm modeling, and power plants to the west. So trains cross my layout running from or to industries which are located off-layout in staging. In addition, I like interchange operations, but there are no interchanges with other railroads in the area I'm modeling. I handle this by using tracks in my staging yard to represent interchanges with the BNSF at Cheyenne to the east and Salt Lake City to the west. That's one reason why you might see locomotives and freight cars from the BNSF and even other railroads crossing my layout. Now let's talk about the benchwork where my staging yard is located. Here's where my staging yard is located on the lower level of the layout. It's directly below Green River, which features my main classification yard. This section of my layout is 12 feet long from corner to corner and 18 inches deep from the fascia to the backdrop. As for height, it is 48 inches above floor level. The main level is 56 inches above floor level, so there's an 8-inch clearance between the two levels. By the way, some people think I'm short. I certainly appear to be because I normally sit on a bar stool next to my layout when filming my videos. But I'm really 6 foot 3 inches tall. Here you see me sitting on the bar stool and standing next to my staging yard. Now, as I said, my staging yard is located under the scenicked part of the layout, but it's not hidden. I see no reason why staging yards should be hidden. In fact, the more accessible they are, the better they are. Since it's not hidden, I have easy access to the track in staging. I feel that easy access to the track is one of the most important considerations in designing a layout, whether the track is in the staging yard or anywhere else on the layout. You can even leave a staging yard in plain sight and scenic it if you want to. Some friends in the hobby and some very well-known modelers have done this. Some people put their staging yards in an adjacent room, and trains arrive in staging after passing through a hole in the wall. But in my house, the walls are made of cement blocks and steel reinforcing rods. So this really isn't an option for me, even if my wife would allow me to blast through the wall to the guest room, where such a staging yard would have to be located. Now, track planning and benchwork for my staging yard. Here's the track plan for the staging yard. To the right on the plan, trains ascend my eastern helix to the scenic part of the layout. To the left, they ascend the western helix. As you can see, the staging yard features 8 double-ended tracks. In the past, it had 2 double-ended tracks for loaded and empty coal trains running in opposite directions, and 6 stub-ended tracks for trains reaching their destinations in staging. But I double-ended all of the tracks back in October 2017, and this was one of the smartest things I've ever done. The compound ladders that I installed at both ends of the yard didn't take up anywhere near as much space as straight ladders would have. In fact, because I used compound ladders, all of the 8 tracks continued to be just about as long as they had been when they were stub-ended. I showed you how I did all of this in a video back in October of 2017 called Staging Yard Changes. I will put a link to that video down below. By double-ending the yard, every track in the yard now connects to the entry and exit tracks for the yard. This gives me a lot of flexibility in choosing tracks for arriving trains. Of course, empty and loaded coal trains run continuously through the staging yard as they did before, creating the illusion that empties always run in one direction and loads always run in the opposite direction across the scenicked part of the layout. As for other freight trains, they arrive, the locomotives uncouple from the head of the train, they do a runaround to the rear of the train, and there they couple up for the return run. This runaround is facilitated by the fact that I head up my trains with 2 diesel locomotives facing in opposite directions. No matter how many tracks you have in your staging yard, it seems like you always need more. But space is limited for most of us. Still, you will need at least one more track in staging than the number of trains you plan to run, so that you can do the runarounds. As I said, double-ending my staging tracks has been a big improvement over stub-ended ones. But I do wish I had reverse loops at both ends of my staging yard so that trains could be reversed quickly for the return trip without having to do a runaround. But of course, reverse loops take up a lot of space, and they do require reverse loop wiring. Not having reverse loops has been a problem, especially for passenger trains headed up by steam locomotives. Doing a runaround with steam locomotives leaves them facing the wrong direction when they couple up to what was the rear of the train for the return trip. And all of the passenger cars are now out of order. Clearly, the runaround, which works for freight trains with 2 locomotives, does not work for steam locomotives. Good track is important everywhere on the layout, but it's especially important in staging yards because any problems that might occur there will be more difficult to reach. In anticipation of derailments, I have already installed re-railers at the eastern end of the staging yard and have ordered 2 more to put at the western end. Hopefully, these re-railers will fix any derailments that might occur as the trains cross the yard turnouts. The length of each track in staging is important. Each track should be at least as long as the longest train you want to put on it. Rarely will all of the tracks in staging be of the same length, so you may want to record the number of cars each track can hold to avoid trying to put arriving trains on a track that is too short. This is called track capacity. It is better to measure track capacity in terms of the number of cars it can hold, rather than measuring it in linear feet. Of course, not all cars are the same length, so you may want to measure track capacity according to the length of the longest cars that you will run on your layout. In addition, you need to factor in the length of the locomotives heading up your trains. I normally head up my trains with 2 diesel locomotives, but I don't run cabooses on my trains because my layout is a modern era layout. Now let's just briefly discuss wiring in my staging yard. I prefer to keep the wiring on my layout as simple and as accessible as possible. A bus wire runs under the layout and drop feeders connect each track in the staging yard to the bus wire. I use Cato Unitrack so I don't have to do any soldering of drop feeders to the track. Some people like to add block detection and cameras to their staging yards, especially when their staging yards are hidden. I probably don't need to do this. For a long time, I was operating my turnouts in staging manually, since I can easily access all of them. But the problem has always been this. There is only 8 inches of clearance between the staging yard and the main level of the layout above it, so it is difficult to see which way the turnouts are thrown. For that reason, I am adding NCE switch cats to each of the 12 turnouts in the staging yard. I will be able to check to see how they are thrown on my throttle and throw them remotely using the throttle. But I would like to add indicator lights to the fascia someday. One of the first things I did in my staging yard was to add LED strip lighting years ago to be able to see what's going on in the staging yard much better. All right, the final consideration, staging yard operations. As I said, I'm installing switch cats on each of the turnouts in the yard. Until I complete that task, full-blown operations using the staging yard will be held up somewhat. Once I complete the installation of the switch cats, I will be able to throw the turnouts in staging remotely from my throttle. That's why installing those switch cats has top priority on my layout. In the meantime, I want to show you just how important operations involving the staging yard are by referring you to a video by Eric Hall of imrro.com called Staging Yards and Tracks, How to Use in Model Railroad Operations. In this video, Eric shows you how his staging yard functions and how he uses car cards for the movement of cars in his staging yard. I will put a link to Eric's video down below. Well, at least I do have car cards from Micromark, but I haven't filled them out yet. In conclusion, I just want to say that staging yards can make model railroad operations more prototypical and more fun. A staging yard will definitely affect the way your layout functions. For me, my staging yard has added tremendously to the pleasure I get from my layout, and including it in my layout design was one of the smartest things I have ever done. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you for joining me for this layout update today. Remember, I try to upload a layout update every Saturday morning to show you what I'm doing on my layout. And I post a weekly show called Dispatch every Tuesday night. In Dispatch, I get to interact with you in a variety-type model railroad show. I encourage you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it yet, and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. So until next time, happy railroading. I'm Roy Smith, and I will see you again very soon.